Welcome into Texans on Tap. I'm Brandon Strange alongside Charlie Palillo and Josh Jordan. Read their work on sportsmap.com and follow them on X at Palillo and at Josh Jordan 975. Click like on the video, hit subscribe while you're at it. Click the bell for notifications so you know when new content drops, especially when we're live after every game this season on YouTube. And when you're on the go, you can find us on all your favorite podcast apps like Apple and Spotify. Charlie, Josh, in years past, going into Foxborough was a much more daunting task. Not so much recently. Houston enters Sunday's matchup at 4-1, New England at 1-4. But the Texans are worse for wear. The injury report is unkind to Houston this week. The big news, obviously, the league's leading receiver, Nico Collins, placed on IR. He'll miss at least 4 games, with D'Amico refusing to speculate on a timetable for him to return. Mixon still nursing the ankle sprain. Pierce limited with the hamstring. Now, concerns about the offensive line with Laramie Tunsil, Kenyon Green, and Titus Howard all not practicing on Wednesday. Charlie, what's your concern level with the challenges Houston's offense now faces going into New England from a depth standpoint?
Yeah, a depth standpoint, and it's not as if the overall offensive production in the key category, scoring points, had been all that great. Even having Nico Collins, it's a real bummer for Nico, who, we're just a quarter of the way into the season, more like a third of the way into the season. But he had a shot to do some real historic things. I mean, even missing 3/4 of the Buffalo game when he blew out the hamstring, he's 74 yards ahead of Jamar Chase for most receiving yardage in the league. I don't think he would have held up at a pace to make a run at a 2,000-yard season, but it wasn't completely off the table. So for Nico, at least he got the extension done, and there's no lingering financial concerns for him. But for the Texans offense, I'm not going to say a devastating blow, but it's a big one. And I think the schedule cuts them a break. And if you could pick your opponent to have to go in undermanned, first time out of the box, at Foxborough is about as good a place as there is. New England's defense has been halfway decent, but they also have injury issues and lost their best safety, Jabril Peppers, because he's facing drug and pretty nasty domestic violence charges. I'm curious to see how Bobby Slowick game plans. They have to try to get the ball downfield to Tank Dell, at least as a threat, right? He's not going to be a 9-10 receptions guy, but to try to loosen up the defense, make them defend more of the field when they don't have Nico Collins to worry about. New England does have one real good corner in Christian Gonzalez, their first rounder last year. I don't know if they'll say, hey, you take Stephon Diggs out of the game, or you make sure that Tank Dell doesn't get deep. But with the running game, just weak on a week in, week out basis, and Joe Mixon doesn't look like he's riding in as a one-man cavalry this week. I think this is a pretty ugly, avoid stupid things game offensively, and let C.J. Stroud do enough improv to overcome an offensive line that even if down a couple of starters, I mean, are you going to be much worse off if it's Kendrick Green playing left guard and not Kenyon Green? I mean, Shaq Mason hasn't been very good. Blake Fisher, look, he's not halfway through his rookie season yet, but in his first couple of tastes, hadn't gone down well at left tackle for Tunsil 2 games ago and then filling in for Howard against Buffalo. So I would not expect the Texans to look very good offensively in this game, but they have C.J. Stroud. The Patriots have Drake May.
No doubt about that. You mentioned Tank Dell. I'm kind of curious how they're going to use him too. I thought it was interesting last week that Tank played 68% of the snaps and Xavier Hutchinson played 71% of the snaps. So when Nico went out, it doesn't seem like they upped up Tank. Hutchinson was getting a lot of those reps. Now, target-wise, Tank had more. He had 4 targets, but that's it, 4. And Hutchinson had 3. But we saw a little bit of this last year where on kind of obvious rushing downs, Tank wouldn't be on the field. It'd be like Robert Woods or one of the bigger receivers because Slowick asked these receivers to block so much in the run game. But in doing that, you're also kind of tipping your hand on what you're deciding to do. If Tank's not on the field and you have your bigger receivers out there, they probably know you're more likely to run the ball. And let's face it, the Texans can use the element of surprise because the run game, it just hasn't been great this year. Maybe you get Dameon Pierce back. Doesn't look like Mixon, unless he practices later in the week, he's going to be ready to go. So I'm with you, Charlie. They got to get Tank going in this game. And then you also mentioned Christian Gonzalez. I mean, he's been really good. He had an interception, 2 forced incompletions last week. They kind of stuck him on Tyreek Hill and had him press him for most of the game, and he didn't do a whole lot. Their Dolphins were 0 for 4 on deep balls in that game. So I think Stephon Diggs he's going to have a challenge ahead of him in this matchup, that he's going to have a good corner on him. I mean, if Tyreek Hill couldn't get going, to be fair though, Tyreek Hill didn't have CJ Stroud throwing him the football. But if we're just talking about matching up corners on receivers, I think this could be a little bit tough here for Stephon Diggs. And I think Tank's going to have to get going. And then the tight ends, I think, should get going in this matchup. Dalton Schultz. I was listening to the Flagship just the other afternoon, and they were talking about how poor his blocking has been this season. So you wonder, they just re-signed Tegan Cotoriano, the Texans did. He was on the team before. He was on the Bears practice squad this year. Texans basically cut him because he couldn't stay healthy. But he's a decent blocker. I wonder if they're going to use that, maybe split out Dalton Schultz a little bit to where you get better blocking and you can use Schultz more as a receiver. So that'll be something I'm looking for, just to get the offense going. If you're going to have some good corners on you, maybe there's some other guys you can spread the football to get some plays there on offense.
I'm with you on Schultz needing to emerge as a more consistent factor in the passing game. I mean, he's never been a blocker. Part of why, $12 million per year when the Texans gave him that extension was a bit on the eye-opening side. But I just think they need to consistently at least send up the warning flare to opposing defenses. This Tank Dell guy is fast, and you better have a safety to his side of the field and free up more of that middle, specifically for the tight ends. I mean, Diggs is on pace for over 100 receptions. Granted, the 17-game schedule makes 1,000-yard rushers and 100 receptions more easily attainable, but those are still good numbers. But Diggs is a premium possession receiver, right? Barely over 10 yards per catch. He does not have the speed that he used to. I mean, he was never a 4.3 guy, but something to loosen up the field. I don't know if they have a back. I mean, Ogunbowale has been the guy most featured throwing the ball to him out of the backfield. But, I'm not saying the first series of downs, you have to call bomb Tank Dell. But maybe in the first 2 series, take a shot. The old cliche in football, the coaches who are 3 yards in a cloud of dust, that if you throw the ball, 2 of the 3 things that can happen are bad. It could be incomplete, it could be intercepted, or maybe you can complete it. Well, that's antiquated by about 40 years now. Tank Dell goes deep, maybe you hit a home run, or you draw a pass interference call. And, of course, then there's the risk of incompletion or interception. But trust in CJ Stroud. Obviously, he has the long ball. He dropped it in perfectly to Nico on the play that, really short-circuited Collins' season against the Bills. But, if you have a premium speed threat, which is always going to be his foremost asset, Tank Dell's never going to be a high-volume catch receiver because he is so small and prone to injury, and that probably factors into the snap count that you alluded to, Josh. But put a little fear of God or take a shot at it by having Tank Dell run the deep post, or just to go up the sideline and seeing if he can hit something big.
I'm also curious about the differences in play calling, given the challenges Houston's had on the ground and now the subtraction of Stroud's favorite target through the air. I also think sticking with the ground game the way that Bobby Slowick has plays into New England's favor. And just commenting on Dell, if there's a concern about his health, where you're limiting the amount of snap counts he gets, then that just goes back into why are you playing him in meaningless minutes going back to the Minnesota game. But I digress. On the other side, New England has had its struggles this season, averaging just 12.4 points per game. Their offensive line is allowing a ton of chaos in the backfield, leading the league in both quarterback pressures allowed and contact behind the line of scrimmage on run plays. This seems to be the area which Houston is ripe to exploit, with the Patriots starting Drake May over Jacoby Brissett. How do you guys like the matchup for Houston's defense?
Overwhelmingly in the Texans' favor. I mean, the Patriots' offense is getting in the range of expansion Houston Texans. They managed to win at Cincinnati, but you look at the Bengals season, and that isn't so much of a wow win for the Patriots as a good job, Bungles. They won that game 16-10. Then they managed 20 points in losing to Seattle. The 3 games since, the Patriots have scored 3, 13, and 10. They have managed 300 yards in total offense once this season, 310 yards. The Texans have had 3 400-yard games. right? Jacoby Brissett doesn't turn the ball over. He doesn't turn the ball over. Yeah, but he doesn't do anything. He only threw one interception, but it's just all nickel dime dump off stuff. Drake May is a big arm guy out of North Carolina. We'll see if it's just a jailbreak for the Texans defense getting after him. Drake May, as far as I'm concerned, has as good a chance of being Mitch Trubisky too, as being a big-time quarterback, especially with the paltry set of weapons that New England has. They changed starting running backs or featured running backs because Ramondre Stevenson already fumbled 4 times. Now he's hurt. Antonio Gibson might be the back. Maybe my favorite stat addressing how feeble the Patriots offense is. Ramondre Stevenson has 13 receptions out of the backfield for an average of 2.8 yards per catch. That's almost impossible, but it's possible because that's 2.8 yards per catch. They have nothing remotely resembling a number 1 wide receiver. Hunter Henry looked like a tight end who could be a big-time player. When the Chargers drafted him, Patriots gave him a big free agent contract, but he's an injury waiting to happen. I mean, if you're in a fantasy league, do the Patriots have one guy who went in the first 10 rounds, 15 rounds of any draft? It's just a horrible, horrible offensive roster. Only the Dolphins have scored fewer points, and of course, that's without Tua now. So if the Patriots score 17 points offensively in this game, the Texans defense had a miserable day.
Yeah, you asked that question about their fantasy team, Charlie. It was only Ramondre Stevenson that was taken in fantasy drafts for their team. And, we'll see about his health. But last week, he rushed for over 7 yards a carry, had a touchdown. Antonio Gibson, who you mentioned, he rushed for over 8 yards a carry. So that's kind of where maybe they can get you on the ground. Texans had some issues with Cook last week against the Bills. So, maybe they can find some success there. And then you mentioned it, their pass catchers. Demario Douglas was their best receiver last week, 6 catches for 59 yards. And outside of that, Hunter Henry, 2 catches for 32 yards. Austin Hooper, I didn't realize he was still playing tight end, but he's with the Patriots. He had a catch for 9 yards. I think it's interesting. Jalen Polk was kind of their big draft pick receiver, and he played 100% of the snaps last week. Had 1 catch for 13 yards. Demario Douglas was playing way less snaps and had way more production for them. So, yeah, clearly you see why they made the switch here at quarterback. It just wasn't working with Brissett. Why, your team's only got 1 win. Why not take a shot on your rookie, see what he can do? And that's really the main fear here for the Texans. It's just the fear of the unknown. What's the quarterback going to look like? What plays are they going to put together for him to try and take advantage of the Texans? So, but I think, Kamari Lassiter had a really nice game last week along with Stingley. He's got a shoulder issue. He may not go this week. So that'll be something to watch. And they've added a corner. The Texans have. They got Kadar Holman. They added him. So usually that kind of tips your hand early in the week. If they're adding somebody to the team at that position, you can probably expect that maybe Lassiter's not going to go here. But in a matchup like this, and Jimmy Ward doesn't look like he'll go either, but since their weapons they haven't really shown us anything yet, Texans should be able to get by here and keep the clamps down on them and keep the score down. The total this week is 38 points. So this should be hopefully a defensive game here. Texans take care of business. CJ does enough to win the ball game.
Texans have still been blitzing more than certainly they did last season. D'Amico's first at the helm. I mean, they disrupted Josh Allen over the course of 4 quarters. Josh Allen, 9 for 30. Drake May, in his first NFL start, I think is at least 2 turnovers in this game waiting to happen, whether scatter-armed throws. He's not thought of as the most accurate fella. Confusing him with coverages, getting pressure on him, and he forces a throw, a strip sack. I just think the Texans' defense, without Stingley, would be a big loss, but that just makes it a little fairer fight against the Patriots' sub-nuclear grade weapons. The Texans' defense should look very good in this game and better, since at Lambeau a week from Sunday will be a much stiffer test.
Before we get into predictions, give me your final X factors you'll be watching for Sunday in New England.
I don't think May is going to have a good game, but the Patriots can freewheel it. I mean, after pulling Brissett, just as I want the Texans to push the ball downfield some toward Tank Dell, Drake May's the 6'5", 220 pounds, straight out of Central Casting quarterback. Don't throw, I'm sure give him a couple easy throws to get into the game. Nah, Drake May needs to throw the ball down the field, take some chances. The Patriots maybe think Texans safeties can be a little bit vulnerable to the deep ball. We've seen Kalen Bullock run by a couple of times in the last couple of weeks. Take your shots and maybe they draw a pass interference penalty or hit the long ball. I think unless silly stuff gets to the Texans, obviously is their game to command. Don't get a punt block. Don't give up a big return. Don't muff a punt return. Don't be loose with the football and give the Patriots a couple of real short fields to drive. I mean, the Texans aren't world beaters, but they're 4-1 with good reason. The Patriots are 1-4 with good reason.
For sure. I think maybe Dameon Pierce, if he returns this week, he could be an X factor for the Texans. Now, the front seven for New England, that's kind of the strength of their team. But despite that being the case, the Dolphins, they found some success running the ball against the Patriots last week. Raheem Mostert, over 4 yards a carry, 80 yards. Jalen Wright had 86 yards rushing. So that was over 6 yards per carry. So if maybe Dameon Pierce can get going, we can finally see this Texans running game starting to take shape here. Hopefully the O-line guys are ready to go. But Howard didn't play last week. They managed to get by. Hopefully Kenyon Green's ready to go. But yeah, I think that could be the case. And then I think, maybe attacking them with the tight end, like I mentioned before, they had some deficiencies against the tight end last week. I think it was, Jonnu Smith for the Dolphins. He was second in receiving for the Dolphins last week, 5 catches for 62 yards. So like we mentioned, maybe Dalton Schultz, some of the other tight ends can make a difference in this ball game.
I'll go with week 5 hero Kaimi Fairbairn as my X factor. I think with all the uncertainty on the O-line's health and your lack of offensive weapons, Fairbairn becomes that much more important of a weapon for them. Maybe may the force be with him. And then you both mentioned Christian Gonzalez at corner. I'm curious how Diggs rises to that challenge. So Texans come in as 7-point favorites as we record this, minus 350 on the money line, over under, Josh, as you mentioned, for points ranging from 38 to 38.5, depending on which book you're looking at. Final score predictions. Josh, we'll start with you this week.
Oh boy. I'll be very chalky. I'll go like 20-13 Texans.
My Sharpie action note. CJ Stroud, when favored by a field goal or more as a Texan, 2-7 against the spread. Worst record in the NFL in that scenario. So what? Past performance, no guarantee of future results. All SEC linebacker, revered as a player and a leader, young NFL head coach after a strong career, defensive rookie of the year. Well, there are 2 of those head coaches in this game, but DeMeco Ryans is the guy who's going to win. Gerard Mayo is not going to have a magic carpet ride of a rookie head coaching season the way that DeMeco did. And I'll go Sunday. It plays out Texans 23. One more Fairbairn field goal than Josh has there. 23, Patriots 13.
23-13. Well, that is unanimous because I have the Patriots also scoring 13 points. I also have them not covering as well. I think this is going to be an ugly game for both teams. I think it's going to be 17-3. I think obviously CJ and I think Kaimi Fairbairn will be the difference there. That's going to be it for this episode of Texans on Tap. We hope to see you back here live on YouTube Sunday late afternoon following Texans Patriots. Come on in and react to us, and hopefully we're breaking down a Texans win. Until then, go Texans.